welcome to your sleep story. I'm so glad you're here tonight. Whatever this day was, however long it felt, however much it carried, it is behind you now, completely behind you. You made it through, and that is everything. So let's begin. Before I take you anywhere tonight, I want to count you down from 10 to 1. And as I count, I want you to allow yourself to sink just a little deeper into wherever you are right now. Feel the weight of your body. Feel what is beneath you, holding you. And with each number, just let go a little more. 10. Allow your eyes to close, gently, completely. There is nothing you need to see right now. 9. Feel your shoulders and let them drop as far as they want to go. 8. A slow breath in through the nose. 7. And all the way out. 6. Your hands. Feel them opening. Whatever you've been holding today, you can put it down now. 5. Your jaw is soft. Your face is soft. 4. Your legs are heavy, warm. 3. You're drifting, not asleep yet, but moving that way. 2. The day is behind you, completely and entirely behind you. 1. And now, tonight's sleep story, the relaxation. Before we go anywhere, I want to stay here with you for a moment. Just here, just now, because this moment, this exact moment right now, where you are lying in the quiet, deserves a little attention, a little kindness. Take a breath in for me, from the very bottom of the belly. Good. And let it go. And as you breathe out, I want you to imagine that everything you were carrying today, every worry, every unfinished thought, every heavy thing is just leaving with that breath, just drifting away. You don't have to solve anything tonight. You don't have to figure anything out. You don't have to be anything other than exactly what you are right now. A person who deserves rest. A person who deserves sleep. Because you do. You really do. Whatever happened today, however hard it felt, however much it carried, you made it through. You are here. And that is enough. That is more than enough. You are safe. And you are here. Bring your awareness gently to your feet now. Just notice them and allow them to soften. The toes uncurling, the arches releasing. All the small held tension of the day simply letting go. Let that softness travel upward, through the calves, through the knees, the thighs. All of it warm, all of it heavy, all of it resting now. Your lower back, your hips. Allow yourself to feel the surface beneath you taking your weight completely, fully. You don't have to hold yourself up anymore. The earth has you. The mountain valley has you. The belly soft. The chest soft. The heart beating steadily as it always has, as it always will. Your shoulders dropping, your arms heavy and warm, your hands open and still, the neck long and loose, and your face, let the jaw go. Let the forehead smooth. Let the eyes be completely still behind their lids. There you are, from the top of your head to the tips of your toes, completely soft, completely warm, completely at rest. You've done beautifully. Now, let me take you somewhere a whole plateau turns pale violet for 3 short weeks each autumn, and the air carries the faint, earthy sweetness of the most precious spice in the world. And an old farmer who has tended this same modest field for 60 years kneels in the day's last light, picking one careful flower at a time, something worth more than its own weight in gold. Come with me, the road to the plateau. Imagine a road in Kashmir, in the valley that surrounds Srinagar, where the Himalayan foothills rise gradually around a wide, fertile bowl of land, fed by rivers running down from the high snow peaks visible on a clear day along nearly every horizon. It is autumn, late October, the particular short window of the year when this whole region transforms. The chinar trees that line so many of Kashmir's roads and gardens, turning a deep, burnished gold and red. The air carrying the first real chill of the coming winter. The high peaks already wearing their season's first fresh snow. The road climbs gently out of the city, through orchards heavy with the last of the season's apples, through small villages where wood smoke already rises from evening cooking fires, the smell of it drifting across fields, still holding the day's fatting warmth. And then, gradually, the landscape opens. A plateau, wide, gently undulating. The soil here a particular pale, clay-rich brown that has, for many centuries, proven uniquely suited to growing the one crop this whole region is famous for above almost anything else. Saffron. The fields stretch in every direction across this elevated, open ground. And at this particular hour, this particular week, this particular season, they offer one of the most quietly extraordinary sights in all of South Asia. The crocus flowers are blooming, thousands upon thousands of them, low to the ground, pale lavender violet, their delicate petals catching the day's last golden light, the whole vast field seeming to glow, faintly, with its own gentle, otherworldly color. You leave the road. You walk out across the field's edge. The saffron field, the flowers themselves, are modest in size, each individual crocus rising only a few centimeters above the dark soil. Its slender petals, a pale, soft violet, almost silver in the day's fatting light, with 3 deep crimson threads visible at the center of each open bloom. Those threads are the entire reason this whole vast field exists. The stigma, the female reproductive structure of the flower, harvested by hand, one careful pinch at a time, dried with extraordinary care, and sold by weight for a price that rivals precious metals, saffron remaining, even now, in a world of industrial agriculture and global trade. One of the very few crops whose harvest still depends, almost entirely, on patient, individual human hands, and the kind of accumulated generations, deep knowledge that no machine has ever successfully replicated. The field stretches before you in gentle, undulating waves, following the plateau's own soft, natural contours. crocus blooms scattered across the dark earth in a density that, from any distance, blends into a single soft wash of pale violet color. Though up close, each individual flower remains distinct, separate, its own small, perfect, short-lived thing. The light at this hour has gone soft and golden, the sun lowering toward the distant ring of mountains, catching the flowers at an angle that makes their pale petals seem almost luminous, as though lit from within rather than simply reflecting the day's fading light. And there, kneeling among the rows, moving with a slow, careful, endlessly patient rhythm, a figure, an old man, bent low over the flowers, his hands moving with a precision and a gentleness that seems almost at odds with their evident age and roughness. You walk toward him. The first breath, the smell of a saffron field at harvest, is subtle but unmistakable once you have learned to notice it. The crocus flowers themselves carry only a very faint fragrance, slightly sweet, slightly honeyed, nothing like the concentrated, distinctive aroma the dried stigmas will eventually produce. Beneath this faint floral note, the soil itself, dry, mineral, slightly dusty, the particular pale clay loam that this whole plateau is composed of, a soil type that, combined with this region's particular high-altitude climate and the dramatic temperature swing between warm autumn days and genuinely cold nights, produces conditions for saffron cultivation that very few other places on Earth can match. And beneath the soil, carried on whatever light evening breeze moves across this open plateau, something wood smoke sweet drifting up from the scattered villages at the field's edges, someone's evening cooking fire, the smell of it mingling faintly with the crocus field's own subtle fragrance. There is, too, a particular quality to the air itself at this altitude, and this season thin, clean, carrying a crispness that anticipates the winter's approaching cold, the kind of air that seems to sharpen rather than soften the evening light. Every distant mountain ridge and every nearby flower rendered, in this particular autumn clarity, with an unusual, almost startling precision. You breathe it in. The old man ahead of you continues his slow, careful work, seemingly unaware or simply unconcerned by your approach. Ghulam. He is 76 years old. His name is Ghulam. He has tended this particular field, a modest plot, by the standards of some of the larger saffron operations elsewhere on this same plateau, but one that has belonged to his family for at least 4 generations, possibly longer. The exact origins lost somewhere in the years before written land records in this region became reliably kept. For 61 years, since he was a boy of 15, first taught the careful, exacting work of saffron harvest by his own father, exactly as his father had been taught by his father before him. He kneels now among the rows, his weathered hands moving with the particular, practiced gentleness this work demands, his fingers finding each open flower, pinching it carefully at the base of its stem, rather than tearing it roughly free, placing each one with the same unhurried care into a wide, shallow, woven basket resting on the soil beside him. This is not work that can be rushed, and Guillaume, across 61 years of practicing it, has never once tried to rush it. The saffron crocus flowers for only a brief window each year, typically just 2 to 3 weeks in mid to late autumn. And within that window, the flowers themselves open primarily in the very early morning and remain at their best for harvest only for a few hours before the day's warming sun begins to cause them to wilt and lose some of their value. Most of Guillaume's harvesting, in fact, happens in the pale, cool light just after dawn, when the flowers are freshest and the stigma's delicate aromatic compounds most fully intact. This particular evening session, in the day's last golden hour, represents something a little different. A final, careful pass through the fields' later opening blooms. A small number of flowers that opened too late in the day to be gathered during his usual dawn harvest, gathered now in the day's closing light, so that nothing the field has offered this particular day goes to waste. He works without hurry, without obvious strain, his decades of accumulated practice having long since smoothed this demanding, repetitive motion into something closer to a meditation than to ordinary labor. The harvest itself, let me describe more closely exactly what Guillaume's hands are doing, because the precision this work requires deserves your full attention. Each crocus flower contains 3 crimson stigma threads, rising from a single point deep within the bloom. Each thread, perhaps 2 to 3 centimeters long, impossibly delicate, easily damaged by anything rougher than the gentlest possible touch. Guillaume does not, at this stage, separate the stigmas from the rest of the flower. That more delicate work happens later, in the evening, inside his own home, under the careful supervision of his wife and daughters, who specialize in this particular, even more exacting stage of the process. Right now, in the field, his task is simpler, though no less demanding of patient attention. Identifying which flowers have opened fully enough to be worth harvesting, and gathering them whole with the same careful pinching motion into his waiting basket. A single flower yields, of course, only its 3 small stigma threads. Once they are eventually separated, it takes, by the careful accounting Guillaume's own father once taught him, and that Guillaume has confirmed across his own decades of practice, many times over, somewhere in the neighborhood of 150,000 individual flowers, hand-harvested across the brief weeks of the autumn season to produce a single kilogram of dried, finished saffron. This staggering ratio between raw material and finished product explains, more clearly than almost any other single fact, why saffron commands the price it does, and why its cultivation has remained, across many centuries, stubbornly resistant to the kind of mechanization that has transformed almost every other major agricultural crop. machine has ever been successfully developed that can reliably distinguish a fully opened, harvest-ready crocus bloom from one not quite ready, or that can pinch a stem with the precise, controlled gentleness Guillem's own weathered fingers bring to this exact motion, repeated across a single harvest season, many tens of thousands of times. The history of Kashmiri saffron. Let me tell you something about how saffron came to be cultivated on this particular plateau, because the history carries a depth and a specificity that very few other agricultural traditions anywhere in the world can match. Saffron cultivation in Kashmir is documented across more than 2,000 years of recorded history, with some scholarly accounts suggesting the crop may have arrived in this region considerably earlier still, carried, according to various local traditions, by Persian traders or by Central Asian travelers moving along trade routes that have connected this whole region to the wider world since long before any of the modern political boundaries that divide this territory today ever existed. The particular plateau where Guillem's field sits, known locally by a name that translates roughly to something like the Saffron Town, reflecting just how thoroughly this single crop has shaped the whole region's identity and economy across the centuries, has been recognized for many generations as producing some of the finest saffron available anywhere in the world, prized particularly for its deep color, its strong aroma, and its high concentration of the specific chemical compounds, crocin and saffronal among them, that give properly cultivated saffron its distinctive flavor, fragrance, and coloring power. This particular combination of qualities, high altitude, a specific clay-rich soil type, the dramatic temperature swing between Kashmir's relatively warm autumn days and genuinely cold nights, and centuries of carefully accumulated, generations-deep cultivation knowledge, has made this small, specific plateau one of the very few places on Earth capable of producing saffron of genuinely world-class quality, comparable to, and in many connoisseurs' careful estimation, considerably superior to, the more widely available saffron produced in Iran or in Spain. Guillem's own family has been part of this long tradition for at least 4 documented generations, his own great-grandfather's name appearing, according to family tradition, though not in any formally preserved written record, among the recognized saffron cultivators of this specific plateau in the final decades of the 19th century. He carries this inheritance with a quiet, unforced pride, not boastful, simply settled, the natural confidence of someone whose family's accumulated skill and knowledge in this one specific, demanding craft has been tested and proven across more than a century of careful, patient practice. The corm, let me tell you, too, about the underground structure from which each of these delicate flowers actually grows, because it represents its own small marvel of patient, accumulated agricultural knowledge. Saffron crocus plants grow from a corm, a bulb-like underground storage structure somewhat similar in general appearance to a small onion, though botanically distinct from a true bulb. These corms are planted by hand in carefully prepared soil, typically in late summer, each one placed at a precise depth and spacing that Guillem's own decades of experience, refined from his father's teaching before him, have taught him produces the healthiest, most productive flowering. A single corm will, under good conditions, produce flowers for several consecutive autumn seasons before its productivity begins to decline, at which point it must be carefully lifted. Divided corms naturally produce smaller offspring corms across their productive years, and replanted, a labor-intensive process that Guillem undertakes in careful rotation across different sections of his modest field, ensuring some portion of his land is always producing at peak capacity, even as other sections undergo this periodic renewal. This whole patient cycle, planting, several years of careful seasonal harvest, eventual lifting and division and replanting, repeats continuously across a farmer's entire working lifetime. The corms themselves representing a kind of living inheritance, passed down in a very literal sense from one generation to the next. The very same genetic lineage of plants that Guillem's grandfather once tended still, in a sense, continuing its productive life in his own carefully maintained field today. He has never needed to purchase corms from any outside source. His own family's careful stewardship of this particular lineage having sustained itself through patient division and replanting across more than a century of continuous cultivation. The evening light on the plateau, let me draw your attention for a moment to the particular quality of light settling over this whole vast Saffron plateau, because it carries its own distinct, quiet beauty. The sun has lowered now to within perhaps 20 minutes of the high western ridgeline, its light arriving at an increasingly shallow golden angle across the whole open field, catching each individual crocus bloom from the side rather than from above, throwing small, soft shadows across the pale soil between the rows. This particular angle of light makes the field's overall violet color seem to deepen and intensify. The thousands of individual blooms taken together, producing an effect that several visiting photographers across recent years drawn increasingly to this region, specifically to document its famous saffron harvest, have described as genuinely one of the most striking agricultural landscapes anywhere in the world. Beyond the field's edges, the wider Kashmir Valley spreads out in every direction. The chinar trees along distant roads and field boundaries, holding their full autumn color, deep burnished gold and red against the plateau's softer violet. The high Himalayan peaks, already snow-capped for the season, catching their own particular alpenglow as the sun continues its slow descent. Guillem has watched this exact evening transformation in its endless small seasonal and daily variations across 61 years of harvest seasons. He does not pause often to simply admire it. The harvest's brief window demands too much continuous, practical attention for extended aesthetic contemplation, particularly during these final critical hours of a given day's work. But he is, in his own quiet way, fully aware of this landscape's particular beauty, has been aware of it since boyhood, finds in it, even now, even after so many repeated seasons, a steady, dependable source of the kind of quiet satisfaction that comes from spending one's whole working life in a place this genuinely, objectively beautiful. The basket, Guillem's harvesting basket, woven from local willow and used across many seasons, is perhaps half full now. The pale violet crocus blooms layered carefully within it, never packed too tightly, since even slight crushing can damage the precious stigmas before they can be properly processed. He works his way steadily along the row, his eyes moving carefully across each plant, identifying, with the practiced, almost unconscious skill of 6 decades of repetition, exactly which blooms have opened fully enough to be worth this evening's final gathering. Some flowers, not yet fully open, he leaves undisturbed, knowing they will be ready for tomorrow's dawn harvest, when the cool morning air and the night's accumulated moisture will have helped them open more completely. Others already past their peak, their petals beginning to wilt and curl at the edges, he likewise leaves alone, their stigmas having already begun the natural process of losing some of their concentrated aromatic compounds, no longer quite worth the careful labor of separate processing. He selects only the flowers in their precise, brief window of optimal readiness, a judgment that requires the kind of instant, practiced visual assessment that no amount of written instruction could fully teach. Only the accumulated experience of having looked at many tens of thousands of crocus flowers across many dozens of harvest seasons, gradually refining an eye capable of distinguishing, almost at a glance, exactly which blooms deserve this particular evening's careful attention. The women's work. Let me tell you about what happens to these carefully gathered flowers once Guillem's evening basket is finally full, and he carries it back toward his modest farmhouse at the field's edge. Inside, in the warm, lamplit main room, his wife, Shamima, and his 2 adult daughters, who still live nearby and help during the demanding harvest season, sit together around a low table, beginning the even more delicate, even more exacting work of separating the precious stigmas from the rest of each flower. This work, known in the local tradition by its own specific name, requiring its own distinct, specialized skill, involves carefully splitting each flower open and extracting, with practiced fingers, and sometimes with the help of a small, specialized tool, the 3 crimson stigma threads, taking great care not to include any of the flower's other, less valuable plant material, since even small amounts of contamination can noticeably reduce the finished saffron's market value and grading. Shamima has performed this exact, delicate separation work for over 50 years, since she herself married into Gulem's family as a young woman and was taught by his own mother exactly the careful, patient hand movements this work requires. Her own hands, like Gulem's, have become, across these decades, extraordinarily practiced at this one specific, demanding task, capable of separating the stigmas from several hundred flowers in a single evening's work, her fingers moving with a fluid, automatic precision that her daughters, despite years of their own practice, still cannot quite fully match. The whole family gathers, most evenings during this brief harvest season, around this same low table. The day's gathered flowers gradually processed, hour by patient hour, into the small, precious quantities of separated stigma threads that will, after a further careful drying process, become the finished saffron that has sustained this family and this whole region across so many generations. The DRYNG, the separated stigma threads, once gathered, must be dried with the same careful attention the entire harvest process has demanded at every previous stage. Traditionally, this drying happens slowly, over gentle, indirect heat, often using a fine sieve held a careful distance above a low charcoal brazier. The threads turned and monitored continuously to ensure even, gradual moisture loss without scorching or overdrying, either of which would damage the delicate aromatic compounds that give finished saffron its full value and quality. Gulem's family has refined this exact drying technique across their own multiple generations of practice, judging the process's progress and completion not by any precise instrument, but by careful, accumulated sensory experience. The particular sound the threads make when gently stirred, their changing color as moisture gradually leaves them, the specific, concentrated aroma that begins to develop more fully as the drying process nears completion. This drying stage, like the harvesting and separation that precede it, resists easy mechanization. Large commercial operations in various parts of the world have developed more industrial drying methods, but connoisseurs and careful buyers consistently report that saffron dried using these traditional, patient, hands-on methods retains a noticeably superior depth of color, aroma, and flavor compared to more rapidly, more mechanically processed alternatives. Tonight's gathered flowers, once fully separated by Shamima and her daughters, will undergo this same careful traditional drying process. The family's whole evening organized, as it has been organized across so many previous harvest seasons, around this patient, multi-stage transformation of a brief, modest, easily overlooked flower into one of the most valuable and most prized substances in the entire global spice trade. What the saffron teaches, Gulem has thought, across 61 years of practicing this demanding, exacting harvest, about what this particular crop and this whole patient way of working with it has taught him. It has taught him First, something about the genuine, durable value that can exist within something brief and apparently modest. The crocus flower itself lasts only a few days, even in ideal conditions, before wilting. The entire harvest season spans only a few short weeks each year, and yet within this brief, narrow window, an entire family's livelihood and a whole region's centuries-deep cultural identity has been sustained generation after generation. The apparent modesty and brevity of the actual flowering period in no way diminishing the genuine, substantial, lasting value that careful, patient, skilled human attention manages to extract from it. This has taught Guillaume something he has come to apply, in his own quiet way, well beyond saffron cultivation specifically. A recognition that the most valuable things in any life are not necessarily the things that last longest or occupy the most obvious, continuous attention, but often instead the things that are tended with sufficient care and sufficient patient skill during whatever brief window they actually offer. The saffron harvest has also taught him something about the particular, considerable value of inherited, generations-deep skill. No university course, no written manual, however detailed, could fully substitute for the accumulated, embodied knowledge that allows his own hands to distinguish. Almost instantly, a harvest-ready bloom from one not yet ready. That allows Shamima's fingers to separate hundreds of delicate stigma threads in a single evening without damaging a single one. This knowledge exists in its fullest, most reliable form only in the patient, repeated practice passed down, hand to hand, across multiple generations of careful attention. Exactly the kind of inheritance that every keeper and craftsperson across this whole wide world of quiet, patient traditions ultimately depends upon, and ultimately, in their own turn, attempts to pass forward. The evening meal inside the farmhouse, once the day's harvested flowers have all been carried in, and the evening's separation work is well underway. A simple meal awaits whoever can pause briefly from the demanding harvest season labor. Kashmiri rice, the long grain variety this region is particularly known for, cooked simply, accompanied by a modest vegetable curry, the particular blend of local spices. Though notably, given the season and the family's own primary occupation, not yet including any of this year's still drying saffron, which will be reserved almost entirely for sale rather than for the family's own immediate consumption. Saffron's considerable market value making it far too precious a resource for most cultivating families to use liberally in their own everyday cooking. A pot of noon chai, the traditional Kashmiri pink tea, simmers nearby. A distinctive local preparation involving green tea leaves, baking soda, milk, and a pinch of salt, producing a delicate pink color and a flavor quite unlike tea traditions found almost anywhere else in the world. A drink deeply woven into Kashmiri daily hospitality and domestic ritual. Guillaume pauses his own evening basket-carrying duties briefly to share a cup, standing near the doorway, watching his wife and daughter's practiced hands continue their patient separation work at the low table. The whole scene lit by a simple oil lamp, warm and golden against the gathering dark outside. This is, in its essential character, an entirely ordinary harvest season evening for this family. Nothing remarkable about it by their own long-accumulated standards. Simply the demanding, familiar rhythm of these few precious weeks, each autumn when the whole household's attention turns, almost entirely, toward this one extraordinary, modest, world-renowned flower. The plateau AT night, as full darkness settles over the wide Saffron plateau, the field itself, so vividly violet in the day's fatting light, disappears into an undifferentiated darkness. The individual flowers no longer visible at all, though they continue, even now, their own patient, biological business of slowly opening and closing according to their own internal rhythms, largely indifferent to whether any human eye remains present to appreciate their particular fleeting beauty. The temperature drops quickly at this altitude once the sun's direct warmth withdraws. Autumn nights on this plateau can turn genuinely cold, even while the daytime hours remain comfortably mild. This dramatic daily temperature swing being, in fact, one of the specific climatic factors that makes this particular location so well suited to producing saffron of such notably high quality. Other farmers' lamplit windows are visible, scattered across the wider plateau, each one representing another family engaged in this same patient, demanding harvest season work. The whole region's modest economy and centuries-deep cultural identity concentrated for these few precious weeks into this shared, collective, intensely focused agricultural effort. A dog barks somewhere in the near distance, briefly, before falling quiet again. The wind moves gently across the open plateau, carrying the cold, clean scent of the approaching Himalayan winter, mingled faintly, still, with the saffron field's own subtle, sweet fragrance, the sound of the harvest evening. If you were to stand quietly, right now, near Guillaume's modest farmhouse, this is what you would hear from inside through the lamplit window. The soft, continuous murmur of Shamima and her daughters' quiet conversation as they work, punctuated occasionally by the small, specific sounds of their delicate separation labor. A soft rustle of flower petals being parted, an occasional brief comment about the day's particular harvest quality or quantity, the gentle clink of the teapot being moved on its low stove, the noon chai's preparation continuing in its own unhurried rhythm alongside the evening's main agricultural work. Outside, the wind, moving steadily across the open plateau, carrying with it the faint, distant sounds of other nearby farmhouses, similarly occupied with their own evening harvest processing. A stray fragment of conversation, the bark of another farm's dog, the occasional creak of a wooden cart being moved or secured for the night. And very faintly, from somewhere further across the wide, dark plateau, the call of a nightjar or some other nocturnal bird native to this particular high-altitude landscape. Its voice carrying clearly across the open, largely treeless terrain in the night's still, cold air. This is the sound of a Kashmiri saffron harvest evening. Quiet, focused, layered with both the practical, demanding labor of this brief, precious season and the wider, patient stillness of a vast mountain plateau settling into its own cold autumn night. The generations, Gulam's own son, Bilal, now in his 40s, has gradually taken on increasing responsibility for the field's daily management across recent years, learning, exactly as his own father once learned, the countless small, accumulated judgments this demanding crop requires. When precisely to plant the corms, how deeply, how far apart, how to read the season's particular weather patterns and adjust expectations accordingly. Exactly which blooms, on any given morning or evening, have reached their precise moment of optimal harvest readiness. Bilal has also pursued, alongside this inherited practical knowledge, some additional study of more modern agricultural science, attending occasional workshops organized by regional agricultural extension programs aimed at helping Kashmir's traditional saffron farmers adapt to genuine challenges. The crop has faced, in recent decades, shifting rainfall patterns, increased competition from less expensive saffron imported from other producing regions, and the gradual, generational drift of younger family members toward different, less demanding occupations in nearby towns and cities. Gulam has watched these challenges develop across his own later working decades with a certain thoughtful concern, though also with a settled, patient confidence that this particular crop's combination of irreplaceable quality and irreplaceable cultural significance will likely sustain at least some portion of this region's traditional cultivation, even as the wider economic landscape around it continues to shift and change. He finds, in watching Bilal's own gradual assumption of greater responsibility, much the same quiet satisfaction that so many other patient keepers, across so many other quiet traditions, have found in their own children's or students' continuing engagement with inherited, generations-deep craft. The corms, carefully divided and replanted across so many decades, will continue their patient, productive cycle. The flowers will continue opening briefly each autumn in this same pale violet abundance, and someone in each generation will continue kneeling among them in the day's first cool light or its last golden hour, gathering with the same patient, careful attention this small, modest, extraordinarily precious harvest. The last round, Gulam returns to the field once more in the very last of the day's light for one final brief check before the evening's true darkness makes further harvesting genuinely impossible. He walks slowly along the rows he has already worked, confirming with a final, practiced glance that he has indeed gathered everything worth gathering from this particular evening's session, that no late opening bloom has been accidentally overlooked. The field, in this final fading light, has lost most of its earlier vivid violet glow. The flowers themselves settling in the day's last moments into their own evening rhythm of partial closure, their delicate petals drawing inwards slightly as the temperature continues its steady evening drop. He stands for a moment, his basket now comfortably full, looking out across the wider darkening plateau. The distant mountains barely visible now as anything more than a deeper darkness against the night skies, gradually emerging stars. 61 years of these exact evening moments. He has never once tired of this particular quiet satisfaction. The day's careful harvest gathered, the field itself settling into its own brief night's rest, ready to offer tomorrow at dawn another modest, precious gathering of this same extraordinary flower. He turns, finally, and walks the short distance back toward his farmhouse, where his family's lamplit, patient work continues, the whole household's attention given for these few precious weeks entirely to this small, brief, world-renowned harvest. The farmhouse 18 night. The harvest work continues for some while longer inside Gulam's modest home. Shamima and her daughters, working steadily through the evenings, gathered flowers. The small, precious pile of separated stigma threads gradually growing on their prepared drying sieve. Gulam himself, his own outdoor work finally complete for the day, sits nearby, sharing a final cup of noon chai, occasionally offering a quiet word of encouragement or a brief comment on the particular quality of this evening's harvest. His own decades of accumulated experience allowing him to assess, almost at a glance, the apparent richness and color of the gathered threads, even before their drying process has fully concluded. Eventually, the evening's work winds down. The drying sieve, with its precious, gradually accumulating threads, is set carefully aside in a protected, well-ventilated spot to continue its slow, patient transformation overnight and across the coming days. The family extinguishes their lamps, one by one, and retires for the night. Tomorrow's pre-dawn harvest already shaping the early hour at which they will all need to rise once again. You are drifting. You are still on that wide, darkening plateau, in a sense, or resting somewhere very like it. The saffron field settling into its own quiet night rest around you. The flower's delicate petals drawn gently inward against the cold. The whole vast landscape holding its breath in its own patient way until tomorrow's dawn light returns. Gulam's basket has been carried safely home. Shamima and her daughter's patient evening work has concluded. The day's gathered treasure now resting on its drying sieve. The lamps have been extinguished. All of it here, all of it holding you. Your breathing has slowed to match this whole valley's own unhurried, patient rhythm, the rhythm of a family and a whole region that has learned across many generations exactly how much genuine value can be found within something brief, modest, and demanding of nothing more than patient, careful, sustained attention. This is what a saffron harvest evening offers, if you allow yourself to receive it, even only in imagination, even only for this one quiet hour before your own sleep arrives. That the most precious things often come from the most patient, careful, repeated attention to something small, that a brief window, properly and lovingly tended, can yield something that lasts, in value and in memory, considerably longer than the window itself. You do not need to gather anything tonight. You can simply rest, the way the saffron flowers rest, their petals closed gently against the cold, trusting that tomorrow's light will return exactly as it always has, to open them once more. The last things, the saffron field rests in full darkness now, its thousands of pale violet flowers closed gently against the cold mountain night. The corms beneath the soil hold their own patient, underground stillness, their productive work for this particular day's flowering complete, already beginning in their own slow biological way, the preparation for whatever blooms tomorrow's dawn light might yet coax from them. Guillem's basket rests empty now by the farmhouse door, ready for tomorrow's pre-dawn harvest. The drying sieve holds its small, precious, gradually transforming pile of separated stigma threads, continuing their slow, patient transformation through the night's cool, still air. Shamima and her daughters sleep, their hands finally still after an evening of demanding, delicate work. Bilal sleeps too, his own gradually increasing responsibility for this whole inherited operation, settling more fully into his own hands with each passing harvest season. The wider plateau holds its scattered lamplit farmhouses, each one now dark, each one's family similarly engaged in this same patient, ancient, world-renowned harvest. The whole region's centuries-deep identity concentrated for these few precious weeks into this shared collective effort. The high Himalayan peaks stand dark and snow-capped against the night sky, holding their own ancient watch over this whole fertile valley, exactly as they have held it since long before any saffron crocus first found its way to this particular soil. The saffron field rests in darkness, thousands of pale violet flowers closed against the cold. The corms hold their patient stillness beneath the soil, waiting for tomorrow's dawn. Guillem's basket rests empty by the door, ready for the next gathering. The drying sieve holds its small, precious threads, transforming slowly through the night's still air. Shamima is sleeping, her hands finally still. Her daughters sleep beside her. Bilal sleeps too, carrying this inheritance a little further each season. The wider plateau holds its scattered lamplit farms, each one dark now each one resting from the same patient harvest. The mountains stand dark and snow-capped above the valley, holding their ancient watch, as they always have. You are held tonight too, by this same patient, brief, precious rhythm, by a whole valley's quiet trust that morning will return, to open what is closed, to reveal what is hidden, to begin again. You do not need to gather anything tonight. You only need to rest, the way the saffron flowers rest, petals closed gently, trusting the light to return. You are safe. You are warm. You are held on the plateau, beneath the mountains, in the cold, clear autumn dark. The flowers will keep their rest until dawn. The mountains will keep their watch. And you can simply rest. Good night, dear friend. Sleep well. Sleep deeply. Good night.